How's it going, guys? Randall, aka Shizukat's here on the Tressa's Collectibles channel, and we have a deck profile today with
212 Dead, or if you saw Facebook and Twitter, also known as Jesse Perez.
All right. And so Jesse, a bit ago, went to Mexico City and played in the BCS there. So how did you do, and what deck did you play?
So out of 155 players, I ended up getting first, and ended up taking essentially mostly Nino. It's essentially, I would still call it a Nino waifu deck because it's using a lot of Nino waifu cards. It's like few cards that aren't actually Nino, but yeah, Nino waifu. So the Storm El Nino.
El Nino has arrived in Mexico City. All right, so your deck, you were preparing for the Mexico City BCS with some pretty big changes compared to what people would consider a normal Nino list. So yeah. What was the idea there?
So first off, because they were going to, it was supposedly not including TD and the set 1 cards originally. So I had to change the brainstorms because that's what set 1. I had to change the TD backup, the 2K backup, because that was set 1. Absolutely no anti-change counter, so that was completely out. And also I normally run a 2 and 2 of the 2-2 split. So I usually run 2 defensive 2-2s, or 3 depending, and the 2 of the set 2 2-2s. So I had to change the TD 2-2s, which have hand encore 10K, to the movie set 2-2s, which sit at 11K cross turn, as long as you have a full front row.
All right, and then leading up to the actual tournament itself, they revealed that the licensing was actually okay for the trial deck and set 1, and so I believe you made some changes, but it was still had some pretty unique cards.
Yes, so I did end up testing it quite a bit, and I did enjoy actually playing the blue 2-2 from movie set, the 2-2 that sends at 11K. And the counter I chose to play was the level 0 full board 2K counter, which during testing actually felt really good. Since most of my game wants to be early game at level 0, you're able to use that 2K backup at level 0. So that was really cool. I did end up reverting back to the brainstorms, the climax swappers, and putting back the anti-change, but probably the biggest change out of testing was the 2-2s and the backup.
All right, so with that being said, let's get into the deck list. So the deck will be appearing on your guys' screen right now, or let's go ahead and just fix those real quick. All right, so as far as the level 0 line, let's start there. So we do see a lot of the familiar cards like the level 0 hand-fixed Ninos, the Rui Jareds, but as you were saying earlier, we do have the 1 copy of the Itsuki level 0. So how was that, not only as a counter, but did you actually make use of that as like a runner during any of your games?
Never. It was never used as a runner. If anything, even as a one-of, it always found itself into my hand, and it was always sitting in my hand whether I needed to hand encore or actually use it as a backup. I would almost never try to go for it as open knowledge. Most of the time it was in my hand without my opponent knowing. And it was always a surprise when I use it as a backup. Almost never would I go for it. I was never using it as a runner, and was always something as a surprise to my opponent.
Okay. Moving on in the level 0 line, we have the 3 copies of the Nino Brainstorm. That's kind of just like a pretty standard choice for this deck. Just gets you your plussing. And then we have the only 1 copy of the Bounce Back Nino. So what was the thought process behind running 1?
I don't really need to use Bounce Back or the Shuffle Back very often. It does come up a few times. If I ever really want to get into it, I have the Ironwood Nino, the Filter Nino, to get into it. But most of the time I saw myself have it in hand. I'll use it once or twice and then, okay, cool, I don't need to use this anymore, so I'll get rid of it. But since it's kind of that type of utility, I didn't seem to need to have more than 1 copy because I don't need to see it that often.
Okay, and then let's see. over here we have the 2 copies of the Pay 1 Sack Top 5, definitely a very powerful card. And I assume that, moving on to the Climax Swapper, I assume the reason that you were running the Nino Climax Swap over the Ichika Climax Swap is mostly for cards like this level 0 and this level 0 being able to only find Nino cards?
Yes. In fact, this Climax Swapper actually helped out in one of my top 8 games, actually the finals game, where I was completely out of climaxes. I had to make sure I was able to mill out the deck. I finished brainstorming twice, and the only way to mill myself was to use a Climax Swapper to keep milling. So I grabbed the Climax Swapper, milled, played over a Climax Swapper with the filter, and then kept milling that way. I played, I think, 4 to 5 cards that turn and end up milling in that way, even with not having stock. So that card actually helped me throughout the game, so I wouldn't eat too much damage in that game.
Right, with the on-play topper waiting room effect,
exactly.
Right? Mm-hmm. All right, and then our last level 0 that we have in the list is the 1 copy of the level 0 Nino. So what does this one do? This one's not super common.
So this one is, it has 2 effects. On play, you can discard a character to draw 1 card. Free, no stock. The second effect is pay 1, discard a character. You can check up to 4 cards. You can grab any card and then discard the rest.
All right, so really, really nice utility option alongside what you're already running the 4 copies of the Ironwood Nino. Just gets you additional deck speed as well, just like you were saying with the level 0 Nino in case you do need to go through that deck.
Absolutely.
All right, so for the level 1 line, we have the standard 4 copies of the 1/1. So Nino has been falling out of popularity recently, especially with decks like Sword Art Online having big level 1 games running throughout the metagame. So obviously you're running this particular line because you are a big fan of Ninos, but how did it feel to run this particular combo throughout the weekend?
Very good. It's my plussing combo, other than using the Brainstormer. I'm using this 1/1, especially my playstyle is I grab it, try to standby it out at level 0, and start getting advantage at level 0. While my opponent still is struggling to keep up in power, or even trying to get over my 1/1, usually doesn't happen. And getting advantage and starting really early at level 0.
So kind of like a similar way to how like Mushoku Tensei decks would utilize like 1/0 Galen. It's like you bring it out at 0, and then you get to farm your opponent's zeros with that.
Definitely.
Okay, makes a lot of sense. And then another card that typically saw a lot of play in Nino lists is that blue 1/1 from the first set. So why did you decide not to run that particular one in your list?
Throughout testing, it felt like that 1/1 wasn't really favored as much anymore, especially going into sets like Helpless. They have the 2/1, they get it out really early. And then going into Miron, they also have that 2/1s depending on if you're like really ahead or not. That 1/1 essentially is more of a dead card more oftentimes than not. And then even going up against something like Escanor, where I have Escanor bombs, your 1/1's gonna die anyway. So that 1/1 realistically isn't giving me enough value to want to have it still in the deck.
Makes a lot of sense. And then we have 2 copies of probably one of our favorite cards in all of the Nino cards, which is that 1/1, gives all of the Ninos Krush. So you're on 2 copies. Some people like to run 1, like I myself am running 1. So how were the 2 copies of that?
So at 2 copies, I'm able to see it enough where like I can stand by it out. There was times where I'm like, man, I really want a 3rd copy.
Oh really? Okay.
Yeah, there was times where I really want a 3rd copy, but the deck is like really tight. I don't have space for a 3rd copy. If I was able to run a 3rd copy, I would for sure run a 3rd copy. But at 2, it's I can see it often enough where I can stand by it out. My game plan is I have 1/1s on the board. I usually stand by out this 1/1 first before I stand by out any 2/2s. So having it at 2 copies allows me to see it more often, so I'm able to stand by it out at 1.
Okay. And then the 1 copy of the anti-change bottom deck bomb. What's the other effect on the?
It has hand out port.
It has hand out.
It has hand out port.
All right.
So up against stuff like Alice, I can keep it on the board, hand out port multiple times. If they're gonna have to side it if they don't want to lose to it, and I can play it out, get rid of multiple lanes with 1 card and a couple cards in hand.
Okay. Did that work out, or did you use that at any point during the weekend?
No, because I didn't fight against any SAO. I did end up using it against a Conda Marine player, so I did end up hand-on porting it a couple times.
Okay, nice. Okay, so next up we have the level 2s. So this is a very, very interesting part of the list. historically, your style has been to run copies of the set 2 climax combo, as well as another 2-2, like you said earlier, a defensive 2-2.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of other Nino players, they like to just run this one.
Right.
So in this case, not only are you running a split between these 2-2s, you're also running 2 copies of the climax that goes with the 2-2. So what exactly is the idea here behind this split?
So the idea is you almost never want to standby out the 2-2 unless the 2-2 with offensive power into the back row, unless you're far ahead or something's happening. Normally, I'll put it into the back row, or you want to standby it out with the other 2-2. You never want to put it into the front row. That's the idea. You never want to put it into the front row. So the other 2-2 then is a defensive 2-2. It's going to be bigger on the opponent's turn, and they're going to have a hard time trying to get rid of it, if they can get rid of it at all. So you're going to use less resources, because normally the 2-2 stands at 7k, assuming you didn't climax combo, and most decks have a easy time getting over 7k. That's usually not an issue. The 2 climaxes are there for decks like Alice, Neuron, where you need that burst of offensive power to make sure you can kill those lanes.
Okay, so going back to what you said about the 1-1 Nino, so I guess the idea then would be you want to prioritize standbying out that first, and then if you hit any additional standbys at 1, you want to be bringing out the big defense 2-2, and then using this as an offensive answer with the climax combo to specifically answer big threats.
Right.
Okay, makes a lot of sense. How were the power lines with the defensive 2-2 throughout the day? Because this one, it gains 2,500 for each of your other front rows. So if you don't have a full front row, then its power does tend to fall. So how was that throughout the weekend?
Most of the time, it's always going to be 11k. If I'm crashing a lane, I'm making sure I'm triggering standby. Or fringe cases, I'll 3-stock a smaller character to retain power. But my opponents usually are going to have a very hard time getting over that 11k unless they have a Slayer or have a level 3.
All right. Next up in the 2 line, we have a very large selection of counters. So typically you will see probably 3 of these 4, the most common being the memory kit counter, the minus soul counter, and the anti-change. But in this list, because we are running pretty much entirely Ninos, you did have 1 copy of that Nino burn counter. So how does this counter work?
So the burn counter says it's a 2/5 counter, and if you have 5 characters with Nino all in their names, you may use the second effect. You can pay 1, discard an additional card to deal 2 damage to your opponent.
All right, and then how many times did you use this throughout the tournament?
Multiple times.
I heard you used it in the finals.
Yeah, I used it in the finals. I used it in the first round of Top Cut. I used it in a couple rounds of Swiss, but the couple rounds of Swiss didn't really matter too much. I was ahead most of the time. Yeah.
And so this kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier about the 2-2 being able to really maintain the board against opponents, allows you to turn on that 5 Nino field condition.
Yes.
Okay, how were the other 3 counters throughout the tournament?
So anti-change is always very good. Anti-change, I always try to grab it against most decks. I'll have a general sense of what type of early plays they have, or if they have early plays, then I'll try to go for it. It's usually one of the backups I try to go for first, especially at level 1, so I have it ready. Once I hit to level 2, I can my anti-change becomes active. The next soul counter, the Ichika, it actually came up only once, which was funny because I survived the game against the 2-soul banking deck. I ended up losing, but I did survive another turn because I used the next soul counter. And if I did not next soul counter that, I would have lost the game at that moment. But it gave me another turn. It was very, very, very good. Against things that have on reverse effects, this did in testing come up to play against Gura. They have on reverse blind stock 2. You can sack your character. If it has Hanako, you can bring discard character, bring it back right away, or you can just let it go and they don't get reverse. The memory kick counter I did not use at all. It was in the deck for a specific matchup, essentially being Azure Lane. Because Azure Lane, this was the very first tournament I believe they were able to use Azure Lane in, and it's in there for the restanders. The restanders with the multiple rounds of Mocha. It also works against Silica, but I actually didn't end up playing against any of those sets, so I didn't end up using that counter.
Okay, yeah. In my personal opinion, I feel like the biggest strength of the Ichiga counter is the ability to sack your characters away, although the minus soul is also very helpful as well. In this specific case, I feel like the fact that you are running the burn counter, I feel like, at least to me, from an outsider perspective, I feel like the burn counter becomes kind of a higher priority pickup as it extends your endgame very well.
Depending on where in the game you are, early on I'll pick up the anti-change, and towards the mid-game I'll for sure want to pick up the burn counter, and if I'm able to grab the Nexo counter for defensive power. The memory kick counter, again, is very situational, so usually I don't need to get into it.
Okay. Next up we have for the 3-line, it's a pretty small 3-line. We have 2 copies of the Nino early play, again over other cards like the Ichika early play because you want to maximize your Ninos. 4 copies of the combo. It's the combo that's pretty self-explanatory. And then for the supportive level 3s, we have 1 copy of the front row 1500 buff and 2 copies of the Icy Tail back row Nino.
Yes.
So how was the Icy Tail back row?
The Icy Tail was amazing when I had it out. Against decks where I didn't have it out, I was looking for it so desperately, especially the first round of Top Cut with Saikano, where they were really compressed. I did not end up getting it until later in that game, but I wanted to see it as soon as possible, and I didn't see it until very late in the game. But every single game, I want to see it 1 copy at least.
And then obviously running this over the Ichika back row does give up the +1 soul boosts that the Ichika potentially gives you, but does enable the burn counter. How did you feel about lacking the soul manipulation that the Ichika would have given you?
And to me, it didn't really matter too much since I have the 1/1 that allows me to choose my triggers. So in a sense, I already have manipulation since starting level 0 with that card. So it didn't really feel like I was lacking anything in that regard. Most of the time, I'm winning lanes, so I'm directing, and I'm able to modulate my soul damage by choosing trigger and choosing if I want to trigger soul trigger or not. So I didn't feel like I was actually missing out on anything in that regard.
Okay, and then a couple other level 3s that you typically see run in these 8 standby lists are the Miku Trial Deck level 3, which has that Icy Tail effect.
Yes.
For that one specifically, I feel like the fact that you're running that level 3 support supplements the need to run that particular Miku.
Yes, exactly.
And then also the Ichika Changer. That's typically a very strong card that allows you to cheat out some of your other level 3s by standbying out the Ichika at 2 and then changing into those level 3s from your hand. So since you weren't running that particular card, I would assume that the strategy would just be to just standby out those targets straight from your waiting room at level 2.
Absolutely. Yeah, pretty much. The 2K front also felt like it was a similar effect where you're using a main phase effect to do an additional amount of burn. So by using the Icy Tail, assuming you hit a climaxes, that essentially instead of doing a burn 1, you're doing an Icy Tail effect during the main phase.
Okay, and then I guess just like one last question with the 3-line is, earlier we talked about the priority of what you would bring out between like the 1/1 and then your 2/2s.
Yes.
So how do you prioritize standbying out cards once you've hit level 2?
Once I hit level 2, I usually try to prioritize getting the 2K front as soon as possible. It's especially against those decks that like to compress a lot. The Icy Tail is very important. So trying to get that out as soon as possible is usually my game plan. After that, it goes in this order. I usually try to get the 1 copy of the Global 1/5 into the front row. So start the snowball the cards that are getting bigger. After that, I would get the early play healer that has hand on 4. And after that, then I'll prioritize getting my finisher onto the board. Usually I'll want to have them in a hand, or if I'm able to standby them into the back row, later turns.
Okay. So typically like to hold the 3/2 combos in hand and then play them once you actually hit level 3.
Yes.
Okay.
I like to keep a very high defensive power because as the finisher only sits at 8/5 during cross turn. So even with a 2-key front and a global 1/5, it's still only 12k. So that's usually a weak point of the finisher, especially into the front row.
All right, makes a lot of sense. Okay, so for the climax line, you are running the 3-2-3 split. This is a split that you've been running for quite a bit now, or splits similar to this.
Yes.
How do you manage the triple climaxes? How do you know when to go for like the level 1 combo, when to go for the level 2, and obviously making use of the 2 climax swaps that you have?
Yes. Most of the time it's very touch by feel, like feeling, and just looking at the game state when what combo you want to do. Obviously, you want to be generating resources, so most of the time you want to go for the 1-1 combo. However, if the situation doesn't land yourself in that then you do have the level 2 combo, which I've done before. Because I'm not able to get over lanes, so using that level 2 combo then guarantees me I get over 1 lane, and then I don't have to worry about sandbagging something into the back row, and I can keep my plussing cards like the brainstorm into the back row along with the 1/1 that gives me 2 trigger.
Okay. All right, and then I guess to finish off this portion of the video where we look at the deck, were there any cards that you particularly felt were underperforming throughout the tournament?
Underperforming. The only card I ever felt was underperforming was the memory kick counter, only because I didn't need it. But that was only ever realistically because I didn't go up against the matchups
Right.
it was in there for. But essentially every single card in the deck felt like it was doing its purpose.
Awesome. All right. So now that we're squared away with all the deck, let's go into a quick round by round. So I don't know if you wanted to like
pull up the match list.
All right, so round 1, you had the buy, as you had the buy card.
I used up one of my buy cards.
And then round 2,
Round 2
was the Bang Dream.
Bang Dream plus 2 Soul and Rosalia top end. So in that matchup, I was trying my hardest to get my deck into as compressed as I can, making sure my deck state is in good order. But it felt like that whole game, my climaxes were just not in the correct place at all. Each turn I would try to fix my deck, and just everything was not going very well. I still ended up surviving one of my opponent's finisher terms with the Nexo counter I mentioned. But going into my next, I did 2 finisher turns. That second finisher turn, my opponent didn't have climax, so I just did 3 instances of damage. He canceled all 3, and unfortunately, I was at 3-6. If my opponent on the second attack triggered a soul trigger, I would have canceled all 3 instances. It was climax, non-climax, climax, climax.
The classic.
Unfortunately, I didn't cancel, but overall, I was able to stabilize somewhat towards the end of the game, but was not able to pull that win on that game.
Okay, and round 3. So what was round 3?
Round 3, if I pull up my list, should have it somewhere. Here it is. Round 3 was Hollow X with Ollie, Hololive.
It's like a Ollie Hachima kind of thing?
It was, if I remember correctly, my opponent just wasn't able to like have climaxes in the hand. I was dominating the board the whole time. Most of the time he was just playing small characters and crashing his board. He played climax I think twice, but I was able to finish him off at low level 2, I believe.
Okay. Was he able to resolve the Hachima Ollie early, or was he running the early play package for the Hachima?
I believe he was.
It's the 2-1 Fubuki with the brainstorm.
2-1 with the brainstorm. I think he was. I'm not 100%, but no, he wasn't. He didn't play any Hachima at all. It seemed like he was bleeding resources the most of the game. Just how it is.
Okay. And round 4?
Round 4 was Dido and Cheshire. 8 choice Azure Lane. That game. I think he comboed once. I was rushing him fairly fast, and his climaxes were mostly at the wrong place. So I ended up shoving him to level 2, I believe, fairly quickly, and he wasn't able to stabilize, so I finished off the game pretty quick.
Okay. Yeah, Dido, honestly, a climax combo that is pretty good even at only 1 copy, because it is able to get 2 cards, but I guess in this case just still wasn't enough, and he was taking like a whole bunch of damage.
Right.
All right. Funnily enough, Azurlane, you were saying earlier, memory kit counter for the Kronstadt,
Right, exactly.
and then he wasn't even running it,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. So even up against Azurlane, it wasn't the correct version of Azurlane that I was going up against.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. Okay, round 5?
Round 5 was Door Gates, Bang Dream, Roselia. In this game, funnily enough, I think he was playing dual laners, not on purpose.
Like only able to field 2 attackers.
Field up 2 attackers. And one of the turns, he had his level 1s that I believe you needed like it to be on the field by itself and summon another character.
Oh yeah, that's the tie that I run.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then he summoned his gate combo, played combo, and then he needs a reverse on his combo, and I played the 2K backup.
Oh, with full board?
Yeah, with full board, so he wasn't able to. So he blew up my board. I said 3 stock.
Oh my god.
And then I played the backup and said, you don't get reverses, sorry. And then he just died.
Jesus.
Yeah.
The fact that you were able to have that much stock to do that is...
I was fairly ahead.
Yeah, that's pretty telling.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
The next game was Kanata Marine. Again, my opponent was having a hard time fielding a lot of cards. I punched him hard very early. He did end up, I believe, try-fielding Kanatas, but since I'm running anti-chains and also the 1/1 Adachi, I was able to get rid of 2 lanes per turn, at least. And he would try to recuperate the board and use resources. He did end up doing Marine combo when I was still early level 2. He got me to level 3, and I destroyed him after that.
Okay. So, were you able to utilize the hand encore on the 1/1 during that matchup?
I think I was able to use on the Adachi. Yes, I was.
Okay, awesome. That was what? That was round 6 or that was round 5? That was round 6. Okay.
Round 7 was another Hollow X and Ollie, but this one was 8 gate and it included Marine.
Okay, so it was like, was it Chloe?
Chloe into Ollie into Marine. His game set was, I don't think he was able to resolve too many copies of his combo.
Of the Chloe or of the...
Of the Chloe. And I just took advantage of him not being in a very good deck state, so I rushed him, and he died.
So it seems like a recurring theme a lot is the fact that you prioritize that 1/1 that lets you choose your triggers, gives you rush potential that 8 standby decks wouldn't normally be able to have.
And it also, even if I have multiple soul triggers on top of the deck, I can choose which one I'm putting into stock. So I'll usually try to prioritize whatever I want to standby out the next turn, and so I have it in stock, so I can pay it out and then be able to standby out the next turn.
Especially like through refresh.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So was that the end of Swiss, right?
That was actually, it was in 7 rounds. It was 8 rounds. So the last round was actually Panda, which I met from Darkstore, La Roma. Hi. He was playing 8 choice Kotori with Dao.
Okay.
That game, I believe he resolved, I think, 2. He resolved 2 rounds of Kotori. One was late level 1. The other was kind of early into level 2. But that game I was also able to use the backup, so he had plenty of open lanes for me to go into and deal more damage while he wasn't in the best game state.
Okay. And then with that, you ended Swiss with a 7-1 record, got into top 8. Do you remember what place you were going to top 8?
I believe I was 6th.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
I was the very last. I would have the worst pairings, the worst pairings into X1s. But I was the very last X1, and the next 2 players were X2.
Okay. All right. Well, X1 was good enough to do the job.
Yep.
And then from there, we go into top 8. So what did you play against in top 8? I believe both of your semifinals and finals were both against Slime, though, right?
Yes, they were.
Okay.
The very first round of top 8 was, I believe, the one I had the hardest time with was Saikano. It was the gold bar gate, kind of a standard build. And it was the whole game. He was basically putting everything into memory. So what he was doing was canceling. He did not have board. He did not have stock. He did not have hand, but he was canceling.
And this is the game where you were saying that you were really struggling to find that level 3 back row,
yes.
Nino, right?
I did not end up getting that out until my second to last turn, which I was already level 3. I couldn't get it out until that point, and I standbyed it out, and then until the next turn, I was actually able to Icy Tail to try to decompress him.
Okay. And then obviously it worked out, right?
It did. So in fact, this game was probably the one where the burn counter actually mattered the most. Had I not done it the way I did at a certain instance, I probably wouldn't have gotten the game. I got it the turn prior to my final turn, in between climaxes. Then my next turn, I Icy Tailed 3, hit 2 climaxes, burned him for 2, he refreshed, and I was able to finish out the game.
Okay. And semifinals against Slime?
Yes.
Normal 8 pants variant?
Yeah, normal 8 pants. Both the decks were normal 8 pants. That game was fairly balanced. We both were at a good health. I was ahead a little bit throughout the beginning of the game, but he was able to stabilize as soon as he got his 2-1s out. So as soon as he got his 2-1s out, then my game plan changed from dominating to board to try to land as much damage as I can with smaller characters. So I would use brainstormers, the filters, and shove them into my their 2-1s as much as possible.
Okay. All right. And then the finals, we were getting a little bit of a play-by-play on that one. Sounds like your opponent was doing some passing,
yes.
doing some eating damage.
Exactly. So my turn 1 standard turn is play a 0. Make sure I have the 1/1 my hand. Get rid of it, put it in waiting room, then semi it out, and then pass a turn. I made sure to kill because he went first. He played a level 0 Rimuru Riki, the yellow one. I made sure to kill that, and I pass turn. My opponent then clocks, draws, passes turn. I'm like, okay, perfect. No clock, draw, no clock, shove my back row, attack 3 times, he goes to 2-0. And after that, he did a level Shizu combo at level 2. After that, he was able to stabilize somewhat, but he was never in a position where he was catching up a lot. I did go from his last turn from 2-1 to, I believe, 3-4.
Yeah, we were joking in Discord chat. It's like there's no way he goes from 2-1 to dead, right?
Yeah, my namesake. I was sweating a little bit. If everything stuck, I was for sure going to die. But I had enough climaxes in the deck where I was compressed, and I shouldn't have worried too much. But there was some pockets where I was sweating a little bit.
Okay, so part of that particular game, like closing out the game, you were able to use the burn counter, which
yes.
I find to be a little bit surprising. That tells me that you were able to have really good control of the board. Maybe that he wasn't able to bring out a whole lot of Murons, or maybe not bring out any Murons. Yes. So what was the deal there? What was going on?
I believe he was fielding 1 or 2 Murons, but I was able to trigger enough standbys and pump enough 3K and do the standby combo to bring out the 2-2 to get over the lanes he did have.
So by like you could crash the lane and then trigger standby over the lane that you crashed and then still have full board?
Not just that, but he would have at least 1 empty lane. I would swing, trigger standby, and then pump my other lanes.
Oh yeah, because the 3K pump from the 1-1,
exactly.
right?
And pump over, so he wouldn't be able to defend them.
All right, and that pretty much wraps it up. I think the one thing that we really learned from this particular set of games is that if you can control your triggers and trigger a lot of soul in that first deck, you can really just put a lot of pressure on your opponent. And that seems to be what was a really important part of winning your games throughout the tournament.
Yes.
All right.
Absolutely.
Okay, so with that, we're pretty much all done. Do you have any last minute shout outs that you have for yourself or any of your friends?
Everyone here in SoCal and everyone in Mexico. I did meet a lot of people in Mexico. It was very fun talking to everyone. All my Swiss rounds, my top rounds, I had enjoy and playing with you guys. And then hopefully I'll see you guys next year.
Awesome. All right, this has been Randall, aka Shizukats, here with Jesse on the Tressa's Collectibles channel. Thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.
Out.